Tiffany Anderson is a professor at YSU in the English department. She is also the director of Africana Studies. Tonight, she is going to moderate a discussion entitled Tolerance in America. Please give a warm welcome to Tiffany Anderson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. It is a joy to see all of your beautiful, shining faces. It is my job as an English professor to place emphasis on language, to consider semantics, and I believe many might say to overanalyze words. With this thought in mind, I would like to consider the evolution of terms used when discussing race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic perspective, and able-bodiedness. There was a time when these demographics reflected diversity. And diversity was a good thing, something universities sought out, companies celebrated, and our country, it seemed, valued. We then began to critique the notion of diversity, questioning, is the representation of diverse bodies enough if people are not fully included, which birthed the buzzword inclusion. Diversity and inclusion. But this panel is not about diversity. It's not about inclusion or even multiculturalism. No, this panel is about tolerance.
I'm consistently brown-skinned son of Muslim immigrants, and growing up, I was usually the token Muslim, the token Pakistani, the token left-handed person. But growing up, the person who I was like the most victimized group that I belonged to was the healthy people, which is a very nice way of saying big boned, which is a very nice way of saying thick, which is a very nice way of saying fat. I was very fat. And I was so fat that, for those who here grew up healthy? All right, struggles real.
I was asked to speak briefly about how I got here. And as a woman of 69 years of age, a woman who tells the truth about her age, I started thinking to myself, where do I begin? You know, we all have long lives and live them, and we have many, as a woman, many kinds of starts and restarts. But for me, it all started in an area of the city of Cleveland called Kinsman. So Kinsman began to change. The neighborhood changed. And I will never, ever forget when I was about this high, I was running around with a little pack of friends. Those were the days when kids played outside together. And a little boy moved into the neighborhood, and he didn't look at all like me. His skin was very dark. And he very shyly walked up to this group of kids playing, and he looked at us and he said, "Can I play with you?" And the kids that I was playing with looked at him and said, "No, Anita, you come with me. You come with us. You play with us. Don't play with him." And for me, time stopped. It just simply stopped. I looked at them. I looked at him. And I saw such hurt in this little boy's face. And somehow I summoned up the courage to say to my friends, "Nah, you go, I'm going to play with him."
I think it's very easy for everyone to get involved and use creative forms of activism to try to bring more peace and unity and especially civility to so much of the conflict that we're seeing across the country. And I think it really begins with the dialogue that we have with one another. For us to step out of our comfort zones and to look around us, I mean, even just looking in the room right now, how diverse the room is, and to know that we can learn so much from one another if we just step outside of our comfort zone and ask someone who doesn't look like us to share their story and learn a little bit more about them. People don't expect the middle-aged Black man who should be so angry and upset about the injustices that we see. I don't think people expect me to respond with love. I don't think people expect me to turn the other cheek. But just knowing that that is the message that the peace activists and the leaders who came before me, that that was the message that they taught. And so even though, sure, I get it, people should feel upset and they should try to walk with this male bravado and feel tough, but I don't think that that's always the solution. Sometimes the solution is to respond with love, you know, and it can be difficult at times, you know, when you see the inequalities and the injustices that are taking place. Sure, I get upset. I get upset all the time. And when I'm there on the front lines, there's often things that get me upset. But I know that being macho in that moment doesn't solve much. And I think just in the same way that I raise my children with love, because I want them to love one another. I want them to love their classmates and the people that they're around. And, you know, I think that should, again, be viewed as a masculine trait, because I think we're raised to feel like love is not a masculine trait, or to share your feelings, that's not a masculine trait. I talk more than my wife in my house, you know, and I love to share my feelings, and I'm constantly trying to get her to open up about her feelings. And I think that we dismantle that just by showing the example of being good communicators, being affectionate with our children and our family members and the people that we're around. But then when we're tested in places where people expect us to react in such an angry or violent way, when you can shock people and show them I'm going to react with class and I'm going to respond with love, then, you know, that's how we change that.
So here's the situation. One of the things the Anti-Defamation League has done since 1979 is to conduct an annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents. Now, these are only anti-Semitic incidents that are reported to us. Trust me, this is the tip of the ice bucket in terms of what's happening. So last year, there were more than 1,100 reports to the Anti-Defamation League of anti-Semitic incidents, either vandalism or an assault or harassment. And we're very careful. It's got to look like a duck, walk like a duck, and smell like a duck before we count it as a duck. And most of those incidents occurred in November and December of last year. We all know what happened in November and December of last year. So, you know, the political climate in this country changed. The level of rhetoric in this country increased, and hate speech increased, starting in a lot of quarters, and it spiked in November and December of last year. Now, I mentioned in 2016 there were about 1,100 incidents that we counted. In the first quarter of 2017, we are over 500. The level of rhetoric, the political climate in our country changed. Look what happened in Charlottesville. Is that not a wake-up call for all of us to be a little concerned about getting to know the other? So I would say that here in Ohio, that follows the trend.
So I did say that unlike Jews and Catholics, Muslims have the challenge that they'll never be absorbed into whiteness. I did a report 6 years ago for the Center for American Progress when our Muslim President Barack Hussein Obama was running for his second term. And around that, what? Too soon? You guys didn't know? He was Muslim. Thank you, progressives and white hipsters, for making the dream into a reality. But at that time, people were afraid about all these memes that came out, right? They're like, what, you know, you guys remember the Muslim memes that came out? The Barack Hussein Obama is a Muslim. And so they wanted to kind of figure out where these memes came from. And we almost did like, if you see those TV shows like Law and Order, when they get like a huge chalkboard and they connect the dots for like the gangsters and, you know, this is the capos. And we found out there was like $40 million since 9/11 that was sent by about 7 major funders that went to think tanks in DC that produced memes such as Obama is a Muslim. Raise your hand if you heard this. Obama is a Muslim. He is. No, he's not. Sharia is a threat to America. Sharia is a threat to America. You guys heard that one? A practicing Muslim is not a moderate Muslim, a moderate American. A practicing Muslim cannot be a loyal American. You guys heard something like that? Okay, so all these memes that were once on the fringe and the right wing and the extreme got pummeled into the mainstream around 2011 and 2012. At that time, the Republican Party that was led by Mitt Romney, he rejected this stuff, if you remember, because he's of the Mormon persuasion. Fast forward to 2016, what was once fringe literally became the same talking points for Donald Trump. And it wasn't just Muslims, it was, what was the first thing he said when he descended down the golden elevators? The Mexicans are rapists and criminals. You guys remember that? Oh, he didn't mean it. No, he did mean it. People like, don't take it seriously. I took it seriously. And then the second thing he said, after Ben Carson got a huge bump for making his anti-Muslim tirade, which he didn't take back, Ben Carson got $1.1 million of funds that same week. It was a rally in Cleveland. The few days after he said those anti-Muslim comments, more people came. And then his Facebook post skyrocketed. So that's when Donald Trump came and entertained the anti-Muslim stuff. People forget that, right? Then after the anti-Muslim stuff, he went after the immigrants and the refugees. Then he went after blacks, and apparently it's the worst time ever, ever, ever for black people, so what do you have to lose? But, let's not talk about slavery. Too soon? My bad. And then I remember I was telling someone else, I was in Florida, where I was talking to a Jewish community that invited me for the first time, and the rabbi said, listen, bro, liberal on everything except Muslims, Palestine, and national security in Israel, just letting you know. I'm like, awesome. And he goes, you're the first Muslim we've ever invited, because I've been hearing the news, and anti-Muslim bigotry, I think, is a problem. So addressing the Jewish crowd, there were 2 tables in front of me that were pro-Trump. I'm like, listen, if you're a student of American history, he's gone after Muslims, immigrants, Mexicans, black people. Who's next? And literally, they're like, I'm like, yes. The reason why I'm mentioning this is, if you look at the DNA of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bigotry, specifically the anti-Muslim memes that I mentioned, demographic threat, they're going to take our women, they're savages, they'll never assimilate, it's a foreign threat. If you literally replace Islam and Muslims with Catholicism and Catholics, it's the same exact memes that were used in the 1950s. If you replace Jews and if you replace it with Jews and Judaism, the same exact memes that were used in the 20s and 30s. The difference is that the majority of American Muslims are not white. 20 to 30% are black, 25% South Asian, 20% Arab, and the rest are miscellaneous. So many Catholics and Eastern European Jews were able to absorb and hide under a cloak of whiteness. You guys with me still? Muslims will never be afforded that same cloak. And there are white Muslims, by the way. And the reason why I gave you that trajectory is the same question you asked about black masculinity, like, oh my God, it's so earth-shattering that black men can hug and be loving. It's the same exact thing when it comes to Muslims and those who look Muslimy. How can you be a funny Muslim? I literally got asked that question by liberal voters in New York. We read an essay you wrote, and it was very funny, and we thought to ourselves, wow, it's a Muslim who's funny. Why do we think that? I'm like, I don't know. Why did you think that? And then they said, it's because when we look at Muslims, we think, and he was trying to be he's trying to be respectful. I'm like, you think? He goes, yes. I'm like, constipated? He goes, no, not constipated, just angry. And this is why in my opening, I'll end on this, is why I said that the 2 major fault lines I see, and there's many fault lines, income inequality, gender relations, race and religion. When it comes to race, it's white supremacy, an ideology of supremacy based upon exclusion and marginalization of the other. It does not say that all white people are evil. It does not say that white people are inherently bad. I'm not trying to guilt the white liberals in the audience. It's an ideology which is the core of America, part and parcel. It's our better angels, that's our devil. And we haven't dissected it, we haven't examined it, we haven't uprooted it, we haven't cleansed it. We haven't. And you see that as the core that I believe is causing anti-Semitism, anti-black sentiment, anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-refugee sentiment, anti-Muslim sentiment. And when it comes to Muslims, the question of integration and acceptance is, unlike Jews and Catholics, it's almost the same exact DNA. What do you do with the black man who's a Muslim? The brown guy with the multi-syllabic name who's a Muslim? I will never be able to hide under whiteness. I can't. And that's the problem then, why you have to dismantle white supremacy or the ideology of supremacy to save all of our communities.
I do think that there is a bit of truth to some of the stereotypes. It's just they're often presented in a very disrespectful way. They when they're presented to us, they're intended to put us down. And I think it's all in one, the presentation, but also in how we receive it. When we can treat things lightheartedly, like you said, yes, I absolutely love fried chicken, and I don't have a problem with that. And yes, I'm a track athlete, and I did really well at that, and I expect my sister on the other end to have also done well with that. So you can't use that as a put down for me. And I think that when we can take away people's ammunition that they would try to use against us and say, I'm going to try to use this as a put down. Oh, all the black guys can play basketball. So what if they can? But I think that we should also step outside of those stereotypes and shock people sometimes. When you're a black mathematician or you're a black scientist, oh wow, I didn't expect that. And we break down those stereotypes. And I think it's just really important for us to remove the ammunition that people are using against us. Because yes, there is a bit of truth to a lot of the stereotypes, but we can't take offense to all of those things. And I try my best not to, and I encourage other people not to as well.
Look, I'm in the business, and every time I think I've seen it all, something else happens to say, you don't know nothing, kid.
You have to proactively pop your own bubble and get your head out of your own cocoon and step into another bubble and make yourself temporarily uncomfortable. You have to proactively bring in people that don't look like you to be co-stars in your narrative.
I find my place, and I've got the kind of personality, fortunately, where I don't stay down for long, and sometimes I get really down, like, oh my God. And then something will happen to make me laugh. I had a call a few weeks back from the only Jew in a small town in Ohio. And he called, he was very agitated and very, very nervous. I said, well, he said, you gotta help me. I said, what happened? He goes, they took down the Robert E. Lee statue overnight in the city. I'm the only Jew that lives here. How do I feel about it? I said, I don't know, how do you feel about it? He said, well, how should I feel about it? Do you have a policy?
Is never underestimate your personal power of being your best version, your best authentic version. You're sharing your story, reaching your hand across the aisle, because that small nucleus, right, your family, your community, your school, can inoculate an entire generation. And the reason why I mention that is because oftentimes we look at what's happening in Puerto Rico, with Las Vegas, climate change. I'm sure most of you are like, F this, man. I'm tapping out. I can't even pay my bills. What? Puerto Rico? What? Las Vegas? I'm done. I'm tapping out. F it. Hopefully Jesus will come and I'll be on the right side of history.
I use those as opportunities to educate and inspire people. Of course, I get upset. I remember just 2 years ago, I was coming across the Mexican border with a few friends of mine in the car. And as we got to the checkpoint and they asked for our IDs, the officer, he closed the booth. And we're sitting there waiting, not thinking anything about it. And my buddy who was in the passenger seat, he was like, yo, something's going on behind us because everybody is running out of their cars right now. I was like, shoot, we should too. And we turn around, and we turn around, but the other cops are like using the cars that people are running out of, and they're positioning their weapons towards our car. And I'm like, I'm a peace activist and the hugs guy. Why are they drawing weapons on us? And we didn't know what was going on. They had us step out of the vehicle, walk backwards with our hands up, literally walked up to the barrel of their gun, then they had us kneel down, put us in cuffs, took us into a back room, and literally shackled us from our arms to our feet to the bench. The whole time we're asking, why is this happening? This is Martin Luther King Day 2016. We just went down to go to the beach. We're asking why this is happening. No reason. They couldn't give us any reason why it was happening. They held us there for about 45 minutes after they let us go. And we still continued to ask why they did it. And they said, you should just be lucky that you get to go, you know? And so we left. And so you can imagine the rage that was in me as I went back home. And you're furious, you know, because you're like, why was I treated like this? I was treated literally like a terrorist, but I've never committed any crime ever in my life, and neither did my friends who were in the car. And, you know, they wanted to do so much about it. We should go over there and do this, that, and the other. I said, no, let's use it as an opportunity to educate and inspire. So what did we do? We went right back down to that border, turned on the cameras, filmed a video about our experience, and broadcast it out to the world that this is how people are getting treated, Black people, just for crossing the border, coming back into the United States. I went to Mexico just to hang out at the beach with some friends in Rosarito. Coming back, that was what we dealt with. And so if I would have just been quiet about it, or I would have done something ignorant in response, then they win, because now I'm in jail, right? If I go and react the way that they probably wanted me to react. But to make sure that other people are aware of these injustices that take place. And fortunately, you know, now I have a platform of 1 million people who follow me on social media. People watched that video. People wrote letters down there and said, what is going on at our borders? You know, and so that's so important, to be able to educate and inspire people. And I felt good afterwards, just knowing that when you use social media for what it's intended for, you have a lot of power. And I try to use that power to get that message out there, rather than just getting upset and flipping out and ending up in jail. So.
Wonderful.
And I actually, that morning, we came out with a policy. I said, you know, sir, yes, we do. Here's the deal. If a community goes through a process and they decide to pull down the Robert E. Lee statue, that's fine. But we're not looking to go into communities and pull down Robert E. Lee statues. And I said, just remember one thing. Just because someone sticks a microphone into your hands doesn't mean you have to comment. I feel so much better.
So speaking about social media, ignoring is a response. I'll say that again. Ignoring people is a response. Willful ignoring of comments. And a lot of people don't know that, but they should, as you can drown out a lot of hate by simply pressing mute on Twitter.
Tolerance in America. You know, I actually try to not use that word as much. I usually push people more towards the word of inclusion. You know, I don't want people to tolerate me. I want people to include me. I want you to include me in your jobs. I want you to include me in your schools. I want you to include me in your activities, your lifestyle. Include me in America and make me feel like I'm supposed to be here. And I think that's so important. And the more that we can really push people towards that, you know, that message of like tolerance, yes, it's important, but you know, when you think of the root word of it, I just want to be included, you know, and so many people do. And, you know, I think that the more that we can really start getting that message out to people, then we're moving towards where we want to be. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
So tolerance is like the lowest bar possible. And if tolerance is what we're going with, then what I would say is, when I talk about fault lines, you guys are at the fault lines. Ohio and the Rust Belt. The rest of the country is looking at you guys for the 2018 and 2020 elections. I'm serious. And I think you guys can really chart a new course for America, right? Regardless if you're Republican or Democrat, many of you, based on your actions and behavior, will chart whether or not America, at the very least, at the bare minimum, could be a place where I might not like you, I might not agree with you, but I believe you have the right to live your life with dignity, and I have the right to live my life with dignity. And maybe, just maybe, if you're willing to graduate and evolve from tolerance, maybe, at the American buffet table, I will invite you to bring your biryani next to my meatloaf, and our kids can eat and get fat together.
Awesome. My 12-year-old daughter recently wrote an essay about her conversations with friends who hold differing opinions of our U.S. President Donald Trump. She concluded the essay with this sentence, and I quote, "It's funny how we can talk about politics more like adults than how adults can." I bring this up because those of us here believe in more than mere tolerance. We believe in diversity, we believe in inclusion, multiculturalism, we believe in social justice. But what do we gain in talking about these things to each other? We change nothing. I challenge you to leave here with a commitment to have conversations like my 12-year-old and her best friends, with the willingness to hear someone else's perspective before presenting your own. In this way, we must practice tolerance because we can't change a person's mind without knowing their mindset. Thank you.
And let me leave you with this final thought. Never let us forget the efforts and courage of Simeon Booker, and to Terry and Ken, our award recipients this evening. May we always follow their lead in helping to pave a better, brighter future. Good night. God bless. See you next year.